Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this video, I'm going to give you my subjective ranking of what I think are the top 5 cavalry civilizations in Age of Empires 2. This does include the HD expansions, meaning there are 31 civilizations to pick from. Now I've already done a similar list for archers and infantry, but this one's been the toughest yet, since there are so many civilizations with either a cavalry unique unit, direct bonus, or just a really solid tech tree and economy that make cavalry a really viable choice at some point in the game. To get a sense of what I'm basing this on, I'll consider a civilization's night rush as the most important thing, followed by their late game heavy cavalry, and the feudal scout rush as the third most important factor. Camels are also a plus, though not required, and same thing for elephants. There's also some extra points for style as well. On the other hand, I'm not including cavalry archers because they're kind of their own thing, and maybe worth their own list. So now that we know the criteria, let's start with number 5, the Maulians. Their early game knights or scouts are both really solid choices with their excellent wood bonus, but it's in the transition to the late game where things get really interesting. Their unique tech Farimba gives all of their cavalry +3 more attack than usual. That's enough to give them some of the best camels in the late game, roughly on the same level as Saracens, and beating discounted Byzantine camels with equal resources. Their light cavalry are also improved considerably, maybe surprisingly allowing them to handle hussars in equal numbers, though they do lack the hussar upgrade itself. Now the Cavaliers aren't quite as good as Paladins, but considering how much faster and cheaper it is to research Farimba than the Paladin upgrade, they still end up with a nice advantage over many Paladin civilizations for a good part of the late game anyway. At the end of the day, they're an unorthodox choice, but I think they're deceptively good, and in my opinion flexible enough to make it into the top 5. Up next at number 4 is the Franks. Now some people might consider them top 2 or 3. They certainly check the box of having a great night rush as their ideal strategy, with basically free bloodlines and more line of sight. Their paladins are also number 1 in the game on account of having the most HP from a civ bonus, plus now a unique tech for faster working stables. And don't underestimate their scout rush either, which now gets a lot of help from an expansion's buff, giving them 25% faster foraging as well as more HP. So what's holding them back? Well, basically it still comes down to their lack of flexibility. They're definitely better than they were in Age of Conquerors with lots of nice changes, but to be frank, with camels being handed out to so many of the newer civilizations, the strength of the paladin just isn't what it was, and isn't enough in my opinion to carry them higher than 4th. In fact, you kind of feel bad for them. In the glory days of Age of Kings, there weren't halberdiers, and very few civilizations specialized in camels, which also took extra bonus damage from defensive buildings, so they definitely weren't seen as often. Now, with units like the Imperial Camel, Genoese Crossbow, Kameyuk, and all Viking infantry getting +5 against cavalry, it's becoming an increasingly hostile world for the once mighty paladin. Moving on, number 3 is the Persians. There's lots of reasons to like them, especially once you're past the feudal age. Their night rush is very respectable, with a nice town center work rate boost helping your economy, and their knights even get +2 attack against archers. Following that up, they eventually have Paladin, Heavy Camel, and Hussar, all of which are fully upgraded. In fact, they're the only civilization that have that. In addition to that, you also get the War Elephant. Technically, it is cavalry and easily handles its battle elephant counterparts from the rise of the Rajas civilizations with equal resources. The elite version can be nearly unstoppable once they get rolling, with roughly 10 times the health of a typical infantry and massive attack with extra trample damage to all enemies around it. Now yes, it's expensive and halberdiers do get an extra 60 damage against it, it's easy to convert and they're hard to mass from castles. I get all that, but I still think it's just a nice option to have in a situation where you need to throw a bit more weight. Even without the unique unit, they'd still have the most complete cavalry tech tree, making them an easy top 3 for me. Next, at number 2 is the Magyars. They've had some nice buffs over the last little while, like their scout rush discount being increased from 10% to 15% and getting siege engineers. They also no longer need a blacksmith for their free melee attack upgrades to automatically research. In their present state, that gives them a very strong discounted scout rush, with an automatic +1 attack on their scouts, letting them pick off villagers in 8 hits with loom as opposed to the regular 10. Their night rush is also helped a lot by that bonus, giving you 2 attack upgrades that together are worth much more than bloodlines, and are useful techs that are easy to neglect. Later on, they also have fully upgraded paladins, of course, meaning that they can handle their own in the late game as well. So far, those things don't necessarily make them better than the Persians or even the Franks, but you then have to consider the elite Magyar Hussar. Once researching their unique tech, that unit drops its entire gold cost and becomes arguably the strongest non-gold unit. They'll still lose to halberdiers, of course, after all they are cavalry, but against the regular Hussar counterparts they do significantly better, and come with a hidden quick creation time and attack bonus against siege. Plus, they just look awesome. If you decide you do want some regular Hussars in there for the conversion resistance, extra line of sight, or just to keep your stables working, that's no problem either, and those are still 15% cheaper as well. It's probably showing my bias towards the late game, but overall I think they hold their own early on and are nearly unbeatable by any other cavalry civilization in late games with limited gold. Still, with all that, they aren't number one though. But before I get to that, I have a few honorable mentions of civilizations that just didn't quite make the list for one reason or another. The first one is the Huns. Now they may have been at the top of an Age of Conquerors cavalry list, but in the newest expansions they're just not quite what they once were. Where a lot of civilizations have gotten stronger, the Huns have stayed pretty stagnant, and I'm just not sold on their new tech to make Tarkans at stables. It was a tough call between them and Malians for number 5, and if cavalry archers counted at all for this list, then they probably would have gotten it. Indians, of course, also deserve some serious consideration because of their imperial camel. The big problem that I see is they're missing the knight line entirely, which I don't think their camels make up for, even with their extra armor and the reduced camel bonus damage from buildings. In my opinion, the lack of knights alone pretty much eliminates them from the top 5 automatically. The Mongols also deserve a mention with a great scout rush and Hussars that do significantly better in melee fights thanks to 23 more HP. They also have camels, which helps, but wasn't enough to make up for missing paladin and plate barding armor. I think there's probably a better list for them to show up on at some point later. And finally, Byzantines were worth considering with the very unique Cataphract, which negates a lot of anti-cavalry damage from pikes and camels. At the end of the day though, without Blast Furnace or Bloodlines, they're just not a top 5 cavalry civilization. The number 1 though, without any question in my mind, is the Berbers. It's true, there's no paladin and they're not exactly known for their scout rush, but once they reach Castle Age, their discount cavalry bonus gives them amazing cost effectiveness that's hard for other civilizations to match. For example, with 2 stables producing knights constantly, the discounts add up to being the equivalent of an extra 4 villagers worth of resources. Numbers advantages also add up fast, with a 15% discount leading to almost 18% more units for the same cost, which means 38% more strength on the field once you factor in Lanchester's square law. That makes their cavaliers roughly equivalent to paladins with equal resources, and gives them at least one of, if not the best knight rush. On top of that, their camels are also discounted and regenerate health. Of course, not being considered here, but also worth pointing out, is their cavalry skirmisher, the Geniteur, and their very solid camel archer. They might not improve the stable units directly, but definitely contribute to the overall mobility of the army. But that's just my list. Let me know what your top 5 are. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.